Good afternoon, everybody. If you're zooming in for the June edition of the FMMC's Executive Briefing Series, you've arrived at the right place. My name is John Ray. I'm the Executive Director of the Florida Medical Manufacturers Consortium, coming to you from the metropolis of Tallahassee, Florida's capital. We appreciate your participation and involvement with the FMMC. And without any further ado, I would like to hand it over to the chairman of the FMMC, Gary Havering with NDH Medical. Gary.
Thank you, John, and good afternoon to everyone, and welcome. Just a quick commercial about the FMMC, or the Florida Medical Manufacturers Consortium. We are the statewide association for the medical device industry in the state of Florida. We invite thank all of you who are members, and invite those of you who are not to please join our organization. You can find us on the web at floridamedtech.com. We lobby on behalf of the industry and provide educational briefings like today's, as well as in-person meetings. Speaking of in-person meetings, I want to remind everybody that our big annual meeting, the 2021 Symposium, will now be held October 4th and 5th of this year at the St. Petersburg Marriott Clearwater. As you know, we had to postpone it last year due to COVID, but we are back, and the hotel's all set up for us. So we look forward to seeing everyone there. It'll be nice to see people in person. Also want to take this opportunity to thank our 2021 Executive Briefing Series sponsors, Larson & Larson and Master Control. Our next scheduled executive briefings are September the 16th and November the 11th, both of those here in the Tampa Bay area. And we do intend to have those as in-person events. So right now I'd like to thank Master Control for their partnership and providing today's speaker and topic. And at this time, I'd like to hand it off to Jennifer Hurst at Master Control to take over.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Good afternoon in Florida. It's still morning here in Salt Lake City. We're live from the Master Control studio. I want to thank John and Gary for inviting us to present today. Before we get started, we just have a couple housekeeping items.
And if we focus.
Oh, focus, so we can click to the next slide.
Just a second.
Just a minute. We're just trying to progress. There we go. Yay. Okay. So as a thank you for joining us today, we have a little prize for you. We have a little present. So if you would like to enter to win a brand new pair of Apple AirPods, there's a QR code on the screen. Just use your phone to scan that QR code. A form will pop up. Just fill in all of your information, hit submit, and you'll be entered to win. A couple of days after the program, we'll reach out to the winner and let the association president know that we did that, and send you your AirPods. Additionally, as we do the webinar today, there are just a couple little housekeeping items. The first one is, if you have any technical difficulties, there's a chat button at the bottom of the screen. Use the chat to chat us a message. We'll go ahead and try to get your problem resolved as quickly as possible. We're also going to have this webinar today be a little bit more interactive style. So we're going to be addressing questions throughout. Should you have any questions for Brian as he's presenting, go ahead and use the Q&A function. If a question pops up, we'll pause for a minute, we'll address the question, and then go ahead and move on. We feel like that'll make it feel kind of a little bit more like a conversation, even though we're hundreds and thousands of miles apart. With that, today's topic is digitizing your organization for a holistic view of data and the possibilities that that brings to you. Brian Curran is our Customer Success Senior Vice President for our Master Control Manufacturing Excellence product, and he'll be your presenter today, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Curran. Happy to be here. Also, John and Gary, thank you very much for this opportunity. Gary, as you were mentioning the event later this year, boy, I really am looking forward to being in person as well. I've got a great team here, and we've got a lot of equipment around me, so we'll make do with what we have today, which is reaching out to you remotely. A little bit about my background. I started out with IBM many years ago, and so I'm more of a software systems kind of person. I don't have life science. I didn't come from the life sciences background, specifically med device. But I've been working with master control for almost 20 years. So I've been helping med device companies with their quality systems for almost 20 years. And then for the last almost 5, I've been entrenched in this manufacturing space. And so I'm really excited to share my thoughts with you today on that topic. So the topic today is all about digitizing and then getting to data and how we're going to be able to leverage that. And so this first slide is a little bit of a shocker, I'm hoping. I'm setting the stage. The first slide talks about our customers have experienced and have projected that they can save up to 30% of their labor costs by moving from paper-based device history records to digitized. One customer estimated it to be 14%. Another customer estimated it to be 30%. Where you may or may not know. And why do these customers know? This next one will explain what I'm talking about and why that first slide was intended to be a shocker. The gist of this slide is, I don't think companies worry about being on paper as much as they should. I think it's an industry problem that we have paper in way too many manufacturing lines. And the reason we don't think about it as often as we should is there's not been a cost-effective or a viable solution available. And so if you don't have a solution that's available, you really don't want to spend time analyzing all your problems, all the problems with the paper. But as solutions are becoming available, now it's time to start thinking about, well, what is the real cost of that paper and what are the real benefits of going to digital? So let me dive into the slide. The slide is depicting what we believe and what we see from working with customers across the nation and actually globally. We see a predominant amount of paper on manufacturing lines. I like to say personally, 80 to 90% of the companies I visit are still using paper on their production lines for their device history records. In the slide, we soften that a little bit, saying, well, maybe 60 to 70% of the companies are still doing that. And the reason we soften it is because there is no industry stat that tells us exactly how much it is. But I will say, when you go visit companies and when you talk to people in general, there is a huge amount of automation and software and computer usage at every manufacturing plant. The question is whether or not they've digitized their device history record. So looking at this chart, you can also apply it to a single company. Initially, I'm referring to the overall market and suggesting that 60 to 70% of the companies are still using paper. But if you look at it on an individual company basis, as you get into larger companies, I was speaking with a top 5 medical device manufacturer earlier this week. And their lead person that looks at software, deploying software in their manufacturing environments, said and confirmed over 50% of their sites are still using paper. So even as we get into the tier 1, the largest, the biggest of the big, the name recognizable companies, those companies are still using paper because the only solution that has been available traditionally has been the manufacturing execution system. It's the MES. And those MESs came about 20-ish years ago. What they do is they focus on the colored section of the chart. They focus on the largest of the large companies because that's where they are able to gain traction for several reasons. Those systems start out at $1 million price point. They take 18 months on average to implement the first line. And so they go after those companies that are having their bread and butter lines. They are having their highest volume lines automated. And really the goal in those situations is hopefully you're churning out enough product, 24/7 by 365, maybe multiple lines. In those instances, it's a little bit like a Frito-Lay. I happen to know the individual who was in charge of automating Frito-Lay's lines for Cheetos, potato chips, all of that. And they try to automate people out of the equation completely. And they can afford to make that investment because they are going to produce such a high volume on an ongoing basis. Life science manufacturers, medical device manufacturers, there's a few that have high-end, high-volume continuous lines. But for the most part, we don't need as many knee replacements as we need potato chips. And so there's a higher mix and a lower volume with life science manufacturers. That's why we see such a large amount of paper. It doesn't make business sense if you're producing a device and you're only doing that 1 week out of a month or on one line out of 10. It doesn't make sense business-wise, financially, to automate and spend the money to get a manufacturing execution system, nor do companies want to wait 18 months to do that. So historically, paper's been the only option for those companies. Paper works, and we don't worry about all the problems associated with paper. Why? Because we didn't have another option. The real problem in our industry today, the slide depicts that the real problem is paper. I suggest the real problem is, as an industry, we haven't learned, we're not aware that there are modern solutions that are available. So that's what I'm going to share more about with you today. Those modern solutions, instead of costing $1 million, you can start out for $50,000. Instead of taking 18 months, you can have your first line implemented in 30 to 60 days. And so as companies find out that's possible, then they start switching to, how much is that paper really costing me? And what are the benefits internally and externally if we're able to switch to a digital solution? So the real goal today, what I'm trying to do in this session and other sessions, is shine the light on the problem, generate and increase the awareness that there are solutions available, and take away some of the FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Take away some of the FUD that's associated with implementing those solutions. So let's look at the next slide. We could talk about the paper problems, and that will be the converse of these bullets. I'm going to switch and focus more on the efficiencies. If you are able to go digital, these are some of the efficiencies. And the reason I'm sharing this is some companies have the luxury, I would say some individuals that are in charge of manufacturing have the luxury of a CEO or a chairman or the board mandating that the company needs to go digital in as many places as possible. And we see companies like that. When they get that mandate, they end up coming to us. Some of our prospects have that mandate. And in those instances, they don't need to spend as much time justifying the expense. There is just an edict, if you will, that we need to go digital. And then the question is not, do you go digital or do you not? It's which vendor do you go with? All customers are not in that same situation. Many of the prospects we work with are in the position of having to justify, do a return on investment analysis, et cetera, before they can get the budget dollars approved to actually move from paper to digital, because not everybody fully understands the value of going to digital. So here are some things that you might be able to use in your own analysis if you're in that situation where you don't have the mandate to go digital and you do have to justify, or even if you do have mandate, you want to have backup reasonings for doing this. Here's some bullets. First one is improve data integrity. So this one is really eye-opening when a company looks at their processes closely. When they look at it and they start measuring right first time of the device history record as it goes through the process. And when they start looking at the extra cycles that are spent because they are using paper. we have humans performing a lot of tasks, and with humans come human error. And then on top of that, you also have GDP, good documentation practices, in your GMP, good manufacturing practice environment. So as your operators come in, they have to be taught special ways. What's color ink? What ways do you cross out? How do I sign? How do I verify witness, etc.? Can I make a correction? There's special rules for that as well. Moreover, you have legibility. I know when I write by hand, I have to focus really hard to make sure that the person that's receiving, typically a birthday card or otherwise, they can read it. Operators out on the shop floor, it's sometimes really hard to tell the difference between a letter and a number. And so legibility is an issue, but there's also the equivalent of typos. Whether I'm dyslexic or not, sometimes I reverse those numbers, even though I didn't intend to. So those kinds of processes come through, and digital solutions can improve what we call data integrity. Another way of saying that is you leverage the computer to make fewer mistakes, to allow fewer human mistakes to pass through the system. So in many instances, customers that adopt a digital solution, they claim to have a 90% improvement in right first time, or a 90% reduction in the errors that are made just by leveraging the computer. Visibility. So get real-time visibility across departments, and I would expand that bullet to say get real-time visibility, period. Visibility across departments, across sites, across shifts, across locations, work to home, for example. This is one area that I think COVID has accelerated. There's already been trends to provide more flexibility and more visibility of processes. Look no further than this. When you order a pizza, I'm able to see when that pizza is going into the oven, when it's done cooking, and when it's ready for me to pick up or when it's out for delivery. We see the same thing from Amazon when we order shipments. We know when it's 3 stops away. But when I'm dealing with a $10 pizza, I gain access to all of this visibility. And oftentimes when we're using paper in our production process, I don't have that same visibility. Rather, I've got maybe $1 million of product or $100,000 of product instead of a $10 pizza, and I can't see what's going on unless I'm on the shop floor. And the reason is it's on a piece of paper. The only person or persons that are able to see what's going on with the production process using the paper are the people that are present with the physical paper. So many customers cite benefits of being able to have increased visibility of the production process across all those other dimensions I mentioned earlier. Accelerating time to market. So this is one that will appeal to your overall organization. And there are many examples as to, with computers, we can go faster than we can with paper. A great example is the review time at the end of a process. So when is your medical device ready to ship? Is it when the finished goods are available to ship? Not in a medical device environment. You can't ship your medical device until the paperwork is done. And so what happens at the end of the process? Well, because the process includes paper and human today, there's errors in that. And so we have customers that have spend 2 to 3 weeks after the shipment is done, ready to go, 2 to 3 weeks to review the paperwork just to make sure that they catch as many errors as possible. And I'll dive into some of those examples. Why does it take 2 to 3 weeks? Well, there's chasing the folders, which is maybe a non-conformance happened during the production process. And is it open? Is it closed? It's in a different system. So how do you know? You have to chase the folder to go find out. Other things, if you have a legibility problem, well, that production run happened last week on a different shift. So if you want to go find the person that actually wrote the number and you can't tell whether it's a 0 or a 9 or a 6, well, it takes a little while to actually find that person. So there's excessive amount of time built into the process to actually review it. And you can accelerate how quickly your product gets to market by reducing that review time, which is just one of the many benefits of going digital. Another one, quickly scale up and scale out. I mentioned earlier that MESs take about 18 months. I think Gartner actually cites that it's on average 16 months. So 16 months to do your first line. Well, what about your second line? Using traditional technologies that have to be custom programmed, it takes just as much time. Using a modern solution, if it takes 30 to 60 days to do your first line, you should be able to get your second line up in less than 30 to 60 days, or no more than 30 to 60 days. Most of our customers see that they can get subsequent templates or device history record master templates written faster as they learn the tool. So ability to scale up, many of our companies, customers start with a small number of licenses, maybe 5 licenses, just to get a pilot done. And then once the pilot is done, we just received an order, another order today. We've had multiple customers that start with 5 or 10, and then that pilot was to prove out the concept, and a subsequent order of 500 operators came in. So, we do have a question. Well, let's interrupt. I've got the 5th bullet, but this is a big bullet that I can come back to. Let's see what the question is.
Okay, I'm coming over with my computer so I can read the question. Is master control configured or able to be configured to accommodate and protect export controlled or controlled unclassified information, CUI, and the associated requirements for protection of that information across the nation's critical manufacturing industries as defined by DoD and DHS?
Ooh, that one's multiple levels.
I know, it's a big one.
So there are, I'll try to answer it in multiple ways. First, it can be configured. Most often, our customers are looking to make sure that there's a sufficient amount of separation. When you're dealing with a contract manufacturer or you're dealing with a customer audit, you don't want to expose the entire system to them. So we have roles and rights that allow you to restrict what an auditor might be able to see. If you don't want to take that approach, we actually allow you to print out the completed device history record and show them just a printed version. When you have multiple sites, one site might be dealing with products that are from competitors of another site. And so in that instance, master control can be deployed in a distributed model, such that site A and site B are not ever able to see each other's production records. So that's one level of security and clearance. You got into, I think part of the question also went into DoD, and I'm not the expert on the DoD, but we have somebody that is beyond being an expert in that space that probably would be better served to talk about the specific certifications and security controls that we have in place. So hopefully that provided a little bit of the answer. To follow up more on the DoD type security, hit me up with an email and I'll get you connected with a gentleman named Tyler J. Cox.
Awesome. Okay, I'll be back if we get another question.
Great. Okay, the 5th bullet, employees can focus on meaningful work. I like to also call this one, master control provides a human-centric solution. As I mentioned earlier, the traditional MESs, it's not really human-centric. It's more often the focus is how do I automate humans out of the process? And so it's clearly a touchy process when you're trying to sell a system into an organization where many of the people will no longer have jobs after that. In the life sciences industry, medical device industry, we are wholly dependent on many people helping us contribute to that. And we can't, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have the luxury of spending that much money to get a traditional system to automate. So our focus should be more on how do we augment the humans? How do we enable them to do more with less? How do we give them more meaningful tasks? And by all means, take them away from the, I'll just call it the tough, mundane tasks associated with managing paper. So meaningful work, human-centric, how that translates into a business environment and business benefits. We have customers who talk about how they are better able to attract operators because they've gone digital. So if you're not aware, the life sciences industry generally pays a little bit more of a premium for their operators. So if I'm an operator and I have a choice of going to a general manufacturer or a medical device manufacturer, I want to go where the medical device manufacturer is. But I'm an operator. I'm accustomed to using my mini computer that I hold in my pocket all the time. And then I'm forced to actually use paper and write stuff on paper. It's a nightmare. Why do I want to do that? I want to focus on my own job, not deal with the paperwork. Based on that logic, customers are able to attract operators better if they've gone digital. Moreover, we also have customers say they're able to retain those operators by augmenting the human, allowing them to do what they're good at, and minimizing how much paperwork they have to deal with. It actually helps the bottom line for a business. I heard from John in a prior conversation that Florida is in a similar position as Utah, and that is we're past COVID, their business is going bonkers, and we're at a state where unemployment is so low that we kind of have to poach operators and employees from one company to another. We're experiencing that in Utah. John said you guys are experiencing that in Florida. Well, to prevent some poaching and to help retain, that could be another reason why you want to go digital, is to create a better environment for your operators. So quite a few efficiencies, benefits that I went through. Again, as a reminder, you can leverage these if you need to justify with your executives, if you're going after budget for moving to a digital environment. Here's some more benefits that I will talk about when I emphasize how the digital device history record can be used in a connected environment. What I mean by connected, if you go digital, whether it's master control or another solution, it's not the first software that's going to be in your environment. There, across the top of this graph, there's a lot of software. There's a lot of automation. And so one of the challenges I've heard and I've seen firsthand is when you go to your executives or you go to whoever you need to implement or purchase a digitized system, you may get a confused look when they say, well, we've already have so much data. We already have so many software systems out on the shop floor. Just look at this. I've got my ERP, LMS, asset management, DMS, document management, QMS. I've got all the, why would I need yet another piece of software to help digitize? What they miss is the device history record. And I'll talk through this slide for a little while. What they miss is that digital thread that connects all of these systems and the information together. It is what you produce. It's a lot of medical devices. And the digital thread, contextualize it, gives you context in the frame of the device history record. All the other systems are critical, but they don't do the device history record. And so people often overlook that the device history record is still on paper. Let me just walk through some of the boxes on top. So the ERP, dealing with the customer orders. When you want to connect that with your device history record, most often our customers, what they want to do is they know about the customer order. The ERP knows about the materials, which materials have been allocated. Wouldn't it be nice to automatically launch a device history record based on that information? And they can with an integration between the ERP and the digital device history record system. What that replaces is there's often a person or a team of people whose sole responsibility it is to look at the data coming out of the ERP and other systems and pull together all the paper needed to start the production process, start the device history from the master template. Next box, learning management system. I was surprised to find out recently that traditional MES systems don't offer this integration, despite it being asked for in almost every case. So the scenario we're talking about is there's an operator out on the shop floor. They haven't been trained, but they're completing their work instruction and filling in the device history record because it's on paper. The system's not supposed to work that way. The system is supposed to make sure that everybody's trained. But what happens if that person misses their training for whatever reason? You don't catch it until the end of the review process. And that's one of the reasons why the review process is so long. And why is this important? Well, one of the things we see is it's easy pickings for an FDA inspector or a customer auditor to come into your site maybe 2 years from now. And their job is to judge how well do you have your systems under control. One of the first things they'll ask for is, show me a device history record from for this product that was from 2 years ago, and prove to me that you know that John Doe, who performed step 2.3.2, actually was trained and certified to perform that step. Because that's so hard to manage, especially as organizations get larger, if you can satisfactorily do that, you're doing an amazing job. But to do that, you're probably throwing a lot of people at it. With the digital system and an integration, when you connect your device history record to your learning management system, you never have to worry about that. It simply won't let the operator perform the work instruction. So using a connected system to run that scenario through again, the operator hasn't completed the training. The step in the process gets to that operator. The operator should be prevented. They would be with a warning saying you have not prevented the training. And then the operator is able to complete that training, or the supervisor is able to find somebody else to substitute for that individual if the training is going to take too much time. It's a great example of the benefits you gain when you connect a device history record to any of the other systems, including the LMS. The asset management, it's another very similar scenario. So if your piece of equipment that has to be used during the production process has not been calibrated, can it go through your system today? It can, and that's why at the end of the process, you have to check for that. And that's also a perfect example is we should prevent that. The computer should do what it's good at and look at the calibration of the piece of equipment and not let the operator use that particular piece of equipment because we know it could create downstream problems. DMS is integrating with your work instructions and making sure that your work instructions are the right version. This is what one of the things Master Control has done very well, and I've been surrounded by for 20 years. When you have paper, you just automatically have rogue documents. Once somebody makes a copy of that, you're at risk of, yeah, this presentation's version 9, but maybe I'm using version 8 because I made a copy. The work instruction, it could be on version 31, but the rogue copy is version 30. So having an integrated direct connection between your DHF digital system and your DMS will prevent problems associated with that, because the work instruction had to be changed for a reason. Maybe it's really significant, maybe it's really small. Regardless, you want to take that risk away. QMS, so you want to launch a deviation during the process, or maybe as you're launching a production record, you want to know the status of planned open deviations. There's so many connections between the QMS, and we're really familiar with this one because we also have provided a QMS historically, and the manufacturing system. LIMS, laboratory, DCS, your distributed control system, equipment, SCADA and equipment. And this is probably a really good time to emphasize. Traditional MESs have heavily focused on equipment. And because there's such a large variety of equipment, especially when you look out on the shop floor and see some pieces of equipment that have been there for decades, that's a really challenging problem. And that's one of the key reasons the process takes a year to a year and a half to get your first line done. If it's heavily equipment centric, it takes time to get all of that programming working correctly. If you're more human centric, that's one of the secrets, if you will, as to how we can so quickly enable a system or enable that first line to come up in 30 to 60 days. So all of those integrations together, I failed to mention the gray box in the middle. It's a relatively new term. Historically, we would have called that middleware, but now it's called it integration platform as a service. So an example would be Dell's solution called Boomi. Another example is MuleSoft, which we happen to use. And the benefit of that gray box in the middle is that's all they do. Like other SaaS solutions, they have specialized in a particular area, and they were able to better, more quickly, and cost effectively connect enterprise software systems together. So that gray box is the middleware between all those enterprise systems, and it can be done in the cloud cost affordably. Okay. So leveraging data. When we have a connected system, let me go back and mention, just as a segue, think about all the data in the blue boxes. Every one of those systems is generating, consuming, outputting data. But where's your data for your device history record? It's locked away on paper. That's probably in banker's boxes stored in some secure location. What we're trying to do when we digitize that, we're trying to connect and correlate the data of your device history record with those other systems. And ultimately enable companies to make better business decisions. So here is a depiction of what I think is a paradox. Medical device manufacturers, life science manufacturers in general, know their processes better than any other industry. They have to. They have a higher degree of scrutiny. They have that inspector is going to come in and say, prove to me that you have your systems under control. Medical device manufacturers document their processes, they follow their processes, and they iterate on those processes better than any other industry. But all the data resulting from execution of those processes is put on paper when you're using a paper-based device history record. So the diagram is showing, yes, what we really know about are the inputs. We know the raw materials, the work instructions, the operator, who's going to build what, when. We know the output. We know the yield, we know the scrap, we have the actual paper-based batch record. But you could argue that all the stuff that happens in the middle is there's no visibility, there's lack of transparency. It's a black box. Yes, you can go to Gemba and see it if you go out on the shop floor, but if you want to inspect what's really happening, it's hard to do so because it's on paper and you have to go rifle through papers. So the paradox is medical device manufacturers are all about continuous improvement. Yet when all of the data is locked up on paper, we're lacking the data needed to inform many of our continuous improvement initiatives. So by digitizing, now we have visibility into things that we just didn't before because all of that data was locked up. So think about some simple things. Simple things like, do we know which operator performs particular steps the fastest? Well, there's a lot of operators, there's a lot of steps, so there's a lot of data, and we might have a gut feel, but do we know which one performs the fastest and creates the fewest errors? Which one generates the smallest number of corrections? Which one creates the greatest yield? And if we extrapolate that beyond the operator, is there a team that does the best? Is there a shift that outperforms one or the other? And similar to the diagram, we kind of know the inputs and we kind of know the outputs. So we can have a high level of understanding, but when something breaks and we're not quite sure if the yield goes down by a substantial amount, how do we go about troubleshooting? There's lots of efforts underway. Having this data available about who did what when is going to be extremely helpful to trend over time and to help those troubleshooting efforts. Keep in mind, it's more than just the people. It's the equipment. It's the materials. It's the materials from a given supplier versus another supplier. It's all of that data that's associated with the enterprise production record can be enterprise systems, software systems can be correlated with your production record data. That's the benefit of going digital. That's the benefit of connecting it to other systems. Next one. So let's talk about some more business-centric outcomes of a digitally connected system. And these are the things that will resonate with the people that have to justify the purchase. I've mentioned several of these. I'm going to offer kind of a encapsulation of those, and then offers the next slide will be specific data points and numbers that you might be able to use in your own analysis. So greater visibility. This is something that I already mentioned. Visibility is becoming paramount coming out of COVID. There's a consumer level expectation that we should just be able to see what's going on, or at least have a minimal status. You can't do that with paper. By going digital, it's definitely one of the most often cited benefit that companies have. And it's also one of the most often cited reasons to go digital. There are fewer silos of automation. If you think about the diagram that showed all the enterprise software systems, each one of those was a silo, unless those are integrated somehow. But they're certainly siloed from the paper-based batch record. So you have greater visibility through the lens of a device history record. You have greater visibility into those other systems. End-to-end traceability. Here's the easy way for me to think about this. For those device history records that are stored in the banker's boxes, can you do a search on those? Traceability often is just, can you find out where a given material was used? That information might be stored in the ERP. Can you find out some production level information about when an operator performed, when a specific operator performed a specific step? By going digital, you can search. And so the way that's phrased most often is you have traceability between the systems. Can you do traceability with paper-based systems? Absolutely, with a large amount of due diligence and persistence in making sure that the operators are all doing everything they can correctly. So faster time to market. When you think about the life sciences market, and specifically the medical device market, faster time to market is great for the business. But one of the reasons that many of us at Master Control enjoy working at Master Control is we work with customers like yourself. We are producing products that are saving people's lives, changing people's lives. That's really part of our mission to do that. So faster time to market is good for business, good for finances, but it's also good for us. It's us as individuals, us as families. Question?
We have a question.
Oh, all right.
I'll just sneak back up here. So the question is, hi again. The question is, how can we do process mining for manufacturers?
So I will answer that one. So in paper, you can't, unless you're one of the companies, out of literally hundreds of companies that I've talked to, we did find one customer who was paying somebody an hourly rate to go through the device history records and translate that into spreadsheets in selected parts of the batch record. So when I hear process mining, what I hear is I'd like to be able to go discover problems in the process. I want to discover the process. What's working, what's not, how does it flow? Are there steps that are serialized and should be parallelized? Just what are the basic stats associated with the process improvement? So that's what I hear when I hear the word process refining. The other thing I would highlight, most of our customers, when they adopt the digital solution, they know of 5 to 10 improvements that they would like to make to their process, but it's so burdensome to change that in the paper-based world. Because keep in mind, most companies, very few companies have one product. They have hundreds of products or thousands of products. That translates into thousands of templates. So think about making a change that might impact hundreds or thousands of pieces of paper. There's lots of risk assessments done. Is it worth going through the trouble of touching that many? So the point is here, when the customers adopt, they bring various people together to make the process improvements that have been languishing and just has been too hard to implement. So that's also kind of a process refinement that's been done in the past, and they just haven't implemented yet.
Okay, we have another question.
Okay,
that
fire
came
away.
in. I know. Please explain your software validation protocol that master control follows. When software is updated, what assurance and controls do you follow during the rollout?
Great question. As you look at vendors that provide digital solutions, one of the things I highly recommend is listen to that question. You will be able to delineate between various vendors with simple things on their website. Competitors of ours will often say, I have a fully validated system. Well, that's a red flag. If you know validation, your system's not validated until it's actually installed, implemented, and then gone through the PQ. So for 20 years, we've been leading the industry and trying to be thought leaders. When software first came out, we would spend 3 times as much as a market, as an industry. We'd spend 3 times as much as the cost of the software on validating. We've been able to switch that by doing more vendor-based, leveraging vendor-based evidence. So now you should expect to spend a fraction of what you spend on the licensing for your validation efforts. To get into specific details, we have an offering called Validation Excellence Tool. It uses a risk-based approach. It's built into our SDLC. So it looks at the features that we're making in each upgrade to look at the risk assessment, help you make a risk assessment, maybe of 10 features that have been included, you only use 5. So you don't need to validate from a PQ perspective, the 5 that you're not using. And then, of the other 5 features that are being used, are you using that in a critical part of your process? Is it part of some less critical part of the process? It aids our customers in being able to further reduce the amount of time spent on validating. And it also helps them, there's usually a larger chunk of time in the beginning to adopt, and then you go through a change management process. And what we want to do is make the upgrades as painless as possible, particularly from a validation perspective. So we have a whole product family. I'm just scratching the surface there. The main thing to think about is as you're looking to go digital from paper, like this question was asked, look at the validation just to make sure you're working with somebody who's familiar with life sciences needs.
Awesome. Okay, we're good. I'll be back if there's more.
Super. Thank you for the questions. That makes it, I know on your side, being a reviewer of somebody that listens to somebody that talks a long time, it's way better when we can interject and switch, make it more conversational. Going back to this slide, 2 bullets on faster time to market. The example I'd like to give on that second bullet, reduce deviations. So we're in an interesting position as master control, being a QMS provider for decades. The sole purpose, I shouldn't say that, the main purpose of the quality event management system, part of the QMS, is to help you, customers, more efficiently and consistently manage quality events, such as deviations. So with a software solution, you can more effectively and easily manage those deviations. But wouldn't it be better if we just prevented the deviations from happening? Certainly some deviations are going to happen, but as we'll see on the next slide, many of our customers estimate they will reduce 25% or more deviations just by doing a digital solution on the shop floor. Why? Because in those numbers that come from our customers, a vast majority of deviations are created by humans and human error. Not intentionally, but through the process, you have a deviation that happens. Again, not all deviations, but the deviations that are created by humans and can be avoided, well, you don't even want to put them through your QMS because we'd rather just not create those. The last one, decreased review times. I mentioned this a little bit already. There are some cases where the review process has been tightened so much. So for example, we've have some companies that do nuclear medicine. Their product has a short shelf life and it has to be shipped very quickly. In those instances, they only have 18 hours from finished goods to get the product into somebody and delivered into somebody. So in those instances, the review times have already been refined. But in most instances, when you don't have a finite limit of time, the review time has grown. We've seen the review times grows and grows and grows. And if it's not particularly long, then the other thing I would recommend looking at is, are there review cycles? So some customers we speak to, oh yeah, our review time is just a day or two. But during the process, they have multiple review cycles. So that might be the largest I've heard is a customer that had 4 review cycles because they know the first one is going to be full of errors. And so their last one looks better because it's already been refined 3 times. Okay, some real world examples. I've mentioned probably most of these. Let me run through the list to see if I can make sure I cover those. 90% reduction in shop floor data input errors and data integrity issues. That is probably one of the main drivers because it's so visual. Our customers see those problems. They have to deal with those problems. It's on the paper. It's on the what I call the gobbledygook. It's when you try to do a correction and then you do it wrong and you cross over. It's just really messy. And so that one's really visible, very common across most customers. 30% increase in employee efficiency while scaling manufacturing. This one is not as common. In fact, we have some challenges in front of us. Many med device executives may have come from a large tier medical device manufacturer who over the last 20 years had deployed an electronic system. And in those instances, they are going to be fully aware that it costs millions of dollars. And when we're talking about the larger implementations, it costs tens of millions of dollars. And it takes years. And many of those, unfortunately, were failed. So we've encountered some situations where everybody thought that going digital was the right thing to do. And then an executive squelched it saying, no, we're not doing that. I've gone through that painful process. It is not worth it. Well, times have changed. And so what we have seen is there are some companies who've had positive experiences with that. They knew the cost, but they also knew the cost of going paper. So one company in particular that I worked with, they estimated they would be able to grow their organization by using 30% fewer FTEs because there were 3 different executives that had come from 3 different companies and they had seen the success of going digital and the pains of going paper. And their actuals are coming out consistent with that projection. 75% reduction in product GMP review. This slide is wrong, or this bullet. This bullet is from 10 to 15 days. They went down to 3 days. Actually, it was accurate a year ago. And the problem is the review by exception process that they deployed still didn't cover all of the exceptions that could occur. So in the software, we actually added some more things to the review by exception process so that they were, even after implementing the system, their reviewers were still going through page by page, line by line, because we missed some things. Well, the review by exception process was refined, and this customer is now down to hours. And then deviations, I mentioned that one already. So I'm going to skip. Looks like we're getting close on time. Machine learning, artificial intelligence, these are all the things that we're going to be able to do with data. And there's some fascinating ones in my opinion. How can I best explain this? I explain this by highlighting it in the vehicles that we drive today. If you're driving a more modern vehicle, you'll be personally experiencing the leveraging of machine learning in your specific driving. So for example, I have a 2017 truck. When it detects there's a vehicle in front, there's a little light that comes on, big light actually, and it's called collision detection. It doesn't pump the brake for me. It auto loads the brake such that when I touch it, it's at 100%. So I save the time of my foot pressing the pedal. That's where the technology was in 2017. Nowadays, if it's bad enough, the system is going to apply the brake for you. I have a different car that does that. Then think about lane sensing. If you start to drift out of a lane, initially there was a beep. It was helpful to know you were drifting, but you didn't know, is it the left or right? And some vehicles introduced haptic or touch sensing. So the left part of the seat or the right part of the seat vibrates when you're starting to drift. After that, they also introduced, actually it'll pull the vehicle back into the lane. So why can't we have these capabilities on the manufacturing shop floor? We should. By leveraging technology, leveraging the data, we should be able to effectively do a hard stop if necessary. And that's kind of what we already do in software. If the operator is about to use a piece of equipment that has not been calibrated, we put a hard stop on it. So we're leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence through a feature, if you will. Same thing with a training check. The real power, the real potential of this machine learning and artificial intelligence is when we start looking at the device history record data, when it's coupled and correlated with all of the data from other systems. As an example, one of our customers has already done this at a previous company and plans to do it at the current company. By leveraging the customer complaint data and understanding where the customer complaints are going, this individual is going to refine the manufacturing process. And as the manufacturing process, the tolerances get tighter and tighter, his hypothesis is that they will save millions of dollars in dealing with customer complaints or no longer dealing with customer complaints because he solved it. And so by connecting these two systems, looking for correlations, he's got this hypothesis and he's also going to monitor his success in making that hypothesis come true. So, despite the real barriers, there is a realistic path forward. And real barriers are plentiful. The paper is working fine. Executives have had bad experiences. I've got to convince somebody to go buy computers for the shop floor or tablets. It's not an easy thing to go digital. But hopefully you'll see that the benefits justify it. The one problem that I see from an vendor perspective is too often we as vendors, we spend too much time talking about ethereal things. So things that like our machine learning and artificial intelligence and how great that is. And it's scary, it's daunting as a customer. It seems like that is way too far in the future and way too expensive. But if you take a stepwise approach, you don't have to go all the way to the fourth level. There's a path. If you're on paper today, the first thing you need to do is go digital. And you don't need to go digital across your entire shop floor. Just start with a line. Start with one product, maybe not even your most prolific, highest volume product. Start with one, and inch by inch, gradually, slowly but surely, and cost effectively, spend $50,000 to learn whether or not it's going to give you a return. Spend 30 to 60 days to figure out the same thing. Then, once you're digital and you start to understand that better, look at how you can integrate it with your other systems. And then as a fourth level, now you're looking at, well, how can you take the production data and put it into your own team? Maybe you have a data lake that stripes across your entire company. Maybe you leverage the digital systems providers, master controls, for example, data lake. Maybe you have your own data lake. Maybe you have your own data team. If you haven't heard, there's a whole new category of positions, data engineers, data architects, and I'm only mentioning a few. So that fourth one, that's a journey. It's going to take a while to get there, and we'll be on that path for a long time. but the realization that I'm trying to share is you'll never make progress to that if your device history records are still on paper. You need to be able to get your device history records digitized so that it can participate in the larger data lake, in the larger analysis of the data across your organization. Okay, Q&A. I don't know if we had additional Q&A come in. It sounds like we have not. I've been watching the time and it looks like we're up on the end of the time.
We are at the end of time, and I'm just looking at our chat and our Q&A, and I don't have any additional questions, but I'll give everybody a couple of minutes. If you would advance the slides just a couple, Brian, and I'll also give you another chance to scan that QR code and register for those AirPods, so you can have a chance at winning those. Just watching. Yep. Nope. Nothing's come in yet. I want to thank again Gary and John for inviting us to present. I also want to let everybody out there know that we'll be following up with everybody who registered, whether you attended or not. You'll be followed up with an email, and you'll get a link to the recording of today's session. So you'll have access to that in case you want to share that with anyone else at your company or coworkers, et cetera. That will be, you'll be able to have access to that. So, and that's it. So there aren't any questions. So
and were we supposed to go back to John and Gary? Hopefully
we are.
Okay.
I just wanted to thank you for your time today.
My pleasure.
And
Thank you.
then I'm going to wrap it up and send it back to John.
Great. Thank you both so much. Jen and Brian, we appreciate the partnership and we appreciate your expertise. Brian, excellent presentation on how to turn data into actionable production knowledge. And that's really the game that we're all in. And we really do appreciate it. I want to thank those who participated and signed up this afternoon to join us. As Gary mentioned at the outset, we are back in person starting in the fall for our executive briefings, where we're actually going to feed people and we're actually going to talk to people in a live setting. So we're all certainly looking forward to that. I will say that we are going to try to do some live concurrent broadcasts of some of our briefings for a lot of our members who are not in the Tampa Bay area. So not all the benefits of COVID are going to be lost as we migrate out of this pandemic and move to an in-person setting. So once again, thank you everybody for your participation. I hope you enjoy the balance of your summer. We'll be in touch about the upcoming symposium. You'll be receiving a lot of emails and such over the summer, but we look forward to reconnecting with everybody in the fall. So without any further ado, our meeting is adjourned. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.